Us to our weekly feature where we look at stories dominating headlines in the country and beyond our borders. Joining us in studio this time is social commentator Donovan Williams. Political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng will also join us in a short while, as well as Africa-Asia Dialogue's senior researcher, research fellow, that's Thembisa Fakude, who's also joining us through Zoom. Thembisa, I'll start with you. We've heard about the removal of a key figure like Khamenei in Iran. This is seen as not merely symbolic. It disrupts decades of power consolidation in Iran. From your perspective, does this create an opening for reform, or are we more likely to see a harder, more militarized Iran emerge?
Well, it depends what you mean by reform. If you're referring to what Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu has in mind, I don't think that's going to be the case. We saw today the support of the government of Iran with thousands of people on the street as the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was laid to rest. So it's going to continue. There are various layers of power and leadership in Iran. So when you destroy one layer, there's another layer that's ready to lead or govern. So that's what you are likely to see. And there's been a digging on of heels by the current leadership, at least that one that has replaced the leadership that was killed yesterday, to say that they'll continue with the agenda of the previous government of Iran. And moreover, they're going to continue pushing back and fighting both Israel and the United States as they continue to target and kill innocent people of Iran. Yesterday, over 148 school-going girls were killed by the missiles from Israel. And they have vowed to retaliate and revenge those attacks.
Yeah. Donovan, we've heard how Iran has vowed to attack, just like Mr. Fakude said right now. But when the U.S. has openly backed regime change in Iran, it raises questions about what global precedent this then sets. How might this shift how smaller or middle powers like South Africa interpret international law and issues over sovereignty as well, as we look at developments? Good
question, and evening. I think it worries countries within Africa, in the developing world, essentially. One of the things we can see clearly, because Iran has been attacked by the USA and in conjunction with Israel, it is quite clear that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. Because if it had nuclear weapons, I don't think the USA would have attacked it, like it hasn't attacked North Korea. And so now it's talking about ballistic missiles. So what is clear, and I think both Naim Jina as well as Thembisa Fakude are both correct in that you can't remove the Ayatollah Khamenei and think you're going to cause change. And right now, what you're going to call militarization, Iran is at war. It's at war, but you do not have the people standing up against the Iranian government in whichever form. This was shown with the disruptions earlier, the end of last year and the earlier this year, that the Iranian government remains the most popular within Iranian society. So you cannot have a situation where the USA can spark change. Neither can they get change by just removing a figurehead, albeit with so much power, because there's layers within that to replace them. So right now it's at war. We do worry. Because that region is now at war, because it includes the other countries in which support Israel and the United States actions in terms of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and so forth. And look, Iran has retaliated not just by attacking military bases, as you've seen, and I'm sure you've reported. It has gone into neighborhoods as well. I mean, there are a number of South Africans in that area as well, and we all are concerned about them. But at the same time, you've had a proxy war between Pakistan and India in Afghanistan. And so that many years ago, when George W. Bush was president, and you were talking about a clash of civilizations between those who supposedly, they pray to the same God, but those who supposedly believe in an Islamic way of faith, and those who believe in a Christian faith and a Jewish way of faith, that you're going to have this clash. And this is what is being fomented. This is what is being catalyzed. And the difference today is, whereas, and they missed a trick, particularly Europe, Western Europe, where they should have sided with the people of Palestine against what the USA and Israel were condoning and doing in Gaza. Now there's no peer to put pressure on the United States. It's shown it'll ignore the United Nations. No peer is able to put pressure on Trump in the United States to back off. And that makes Africa worried because we don't have nuclear arms. We don't have peers to act on our behalf. And so where this goes to and how far this goes, we'll have to watch and see, but it is a very, very tender time for the world, including particularly Africa.
Asanda, to take from Donovan's words, this could go very far. And as we continue tracking this renewed tensions in the Middle East, many are asking, especially here in South Africa, what impact will this have on the local markets as well? So South Africa does import a significant portion of its oil. If, for instance, tensions in the Strait of Hormuz do escalate, how quickly could this pressure, for instance, the rand or fuel prices here back home?
Well, it's not just oil prices, a couple of things. So firstly, we've got MTN that is in Iran, and they could be in a lot of trouble there because it's a big company or big corporate in South Africa. So there will be direct implications to South Africans possibly and to the South African economy because of the size of MTN. You also have, as you're talking about our ability to import oil, and you also have the fact that, if that particular area is closed off, South Africa itself may actually see increased trade or increased ships around South Africa's Cape of Good Hope because, the top part of the world will effectively be impossible to pass through when there's a war in that region. And so there could be potentially good benefits in terms of increased shipments coming around our side, but there could be negative impact in terms of our ability to get oil. But it's obviously not just South Africa, but the entire globe right now is on tenterhooks because from a perspective of this could be World War III in the sense that everything that's happening could lead to both America and Iran insisting that the world must take sides. And if we have to take sides, we have a relationship with Iran under BRICS. Iran was here not a long time ago with its ships basically having what was called a military exercise. And so there's lots going on. And we saw with both the, the Russia versus Ukraine or Ukraine versus Russia, depending on who you believe, conflict, there were issues around grain and there were issues around other food sources that people could suddenly not get a hold of. So it's not just oil, but it's also some foodstuffs that we haven't thought of and everything else that you can think of that needs to travel in order to get to South Africa and to get from South Africa to the rest of the world.
Mr. Fakude, we've already started speaking about retaliatory threats and also regional actors also bracing for a spillover. Let's speak to this issue. What are the key indicators that, for instance, South Africa should be monitoring to gauge whether this escalates into a prolonged regional conflict?
Well, South Africa should observe and shouldn't be the first to put its head on the block, whether by issuing presidential statements or positions on what's going on at the moment. I think it's important for us to piggyback on other bigger powers in terms of issuing statements, given that we are having our own challenges, particularly when it comes to relations with the United States. So that's the point. I think it's key and it's very important. We are certainly going to be having a lot of maritime traffic coming our way. Unfortunately, I don't think we're fit for purpose or nor our ports fit for purpose to take advantage of this situation in inverted commas, because our ports are also struggling to even deal with the current traffic that's coming its way. So this is an opportunity, of course, for South Africa, but at the same time, I think we also need to brace ourselves for higher prices, particularly when it comes to energy, gas and oil. We know that large part of energy comes from the Gulf, and if the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, as it's the case at the moment, and the Houthis are threatening to bomb all the ships that are going to be going through the Bab el-Mandeb into the Suez, then we are going to be facing difficult times ahead. So there is that preparation. But for me, the other question which I think is very important is, what's next after this? Who's next? Because we see Donald Trump has an axe to grind with many countries. Benjamin Netanyahu has got an axe, particularly with South Africa, to grind. So we need to prepare ourselves in all directions, economically and otherwise, because we don't know what's going to happen after this. These guys seem hell-bent at disrupting politics as we know them. Cuba is also on the list of being disrupted. So nobody knows. But what we know for sure is that South Africa has rubbed both Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump in a certain way, which has necessitated a certain very harsh and threatening rhetoric over the past couple of months or years since that case at ICJ towards South Africa. So there is a need, I think, to brace ourselves and prepare ourselves in all aspects, politically and economically.
Donovan, to take from Thembisa's words, there is a need to prepare ourselves, but oftentimes global instability often amplifies domestic pressures or domestic frustrations. In a country like South Africa, already dealing with unemployment and service delivery challenges, how easily can international shocks, if you will, how can it deepen internal political volatility in this country?
Oh no, it always has an impact, and I think what what Thembisa has relayed is quite correct in that our economy needs to grow. It hasn't been able to grow, and the more you are going to be cutting off resources that we require, like oil, and so forth, and where Iran is a great supplier, but also not that. As we've noticed that the Trump game plan is to cut off supply to China. One has written on that numerous times. And he stopped Venezuela. He's taken over Venezuela in one way or the other, and which was a major supplier of oil to China. He's stopped now Iran. By bombing Iran and this, Iran won't be able to supply China as it has in the past, or as it has been doing. So China is also a great trade partner, not just of South Africa, but of Africa. And so he's basically cutting off countries that trade with China. South Africa trades with China. But at the same time, you have United States. So as much as I see what Thembisa is saying is that you don't want to rub them up the wrong way, but you have a country that operates with a stick completely, not with a fair trade understanding. And so the United States has shown that they're not a good partner to have right now under Donald Trump. So South Africa has to play it closely. We have to be with the non-aligned movement, with the United Nations Secretary General, which has called for peace. The President has issued that. We have to retain our integrity without making it our fight. But we have to make certain we stand with the rest of the continent who has growing trade with China, which can prove a risk because the United States does not enjoy that you are trading with China. That's what it has shown since Trump has come in with Biden, but particularly with Trump. So it is a difficult period. It will require, though, political parties in our country to say, look here, we need to stand together. But we're in an election year for local government elections. And the country is not clear who's going to be there aren't outright winners. So are political parties that mature to put aside differences to do what's good for the country? I won't hold my breath.
You won't hold your breath. Asanda, it segues quite nicely into my next theme. I mean, President Cyril Ramaphosa has positioned South Africa as non-aligned, yet globally engaged as well. In a conflict where BRICS partners may be divided, does neutrality still serve our strategic interests?
Well, I don't think we have a choice but to be neutral at this point. So it's no longer even just a matter of what we actually desire. It's also a reality that South Africa's military might is not big enough to actually have us be very much committed to, for instance, an Iran military partnership. We punch above our weight in the sense that we're a middle power and we have international influence both on the continent and, in the global South movement. But when it comes to actual military might, we're not anywhere near where we could be as a country of our size. But I think what this is highlighting for us is that we need to put in even more effort, step it up 100 times, the free trade, African free trade agreements, and our partnerships with the rest of the continent. Because Nigeria has oil, Angola has oil, and various other African countries have oil. And if we were in a situation where we had built those relationships properly, we wouldn't be worried about oil that needs to come from the Middle East, because we would have oil coming from the continent. And if you look at some of the very important work that China has done in terms of the Belt and Roads projects that they've taken, they've really done a big job. I mean, obviously, there's no free lunch, so it's not an altruistic move, but they've done a lot to try and connect the continent, across all the way from Cape to Cairo, as it were. And these are the things that we need to look at. What are the pathways? Because if you don't need to use the ship, then you need to look at what are the internal pathways that are required for us to be able to get oil from Nigeria, where does it get processed, and how does it get to us in a format that we can use? Or how do we begin to think about having processing ourselves at the size that is required for our population? So there's a lot of potential in terms of thinking strategically, in terms of economic forays that we could go to, but I don't know if we necessarily are ready for what is required. And there is, of course, the fact that the crisis is not something that we're looking at in the future. It's happening right now. Food shortages could start as early as tomorrow. Oil shortages could start as early as tomorrow, etc. We don't know how much the country has in reserves in terms of oil. We don't know how much the country has in terms of actual food that can be distributed to South Africa if we get to a point where nobody can get anywhere. Because if you think about Dubai as a strategic point that now has been shut down, there are no planes leaving or landing in Dubai at the moment, and that is a big global connector, and that is going to have huge implications, not just for global trade in terms of movement of goods, but also for trade in terms of movement of people, and of course for tourism, because you've got people who are supposed to have landed in Cape Town who are not there. And so we're seeing COVID type of issues. And so one hopes that we have some experience from COVID in terms of coping, but also I think that, this is like COVID conditions, but it's not quite COVID conditions. And we are not necessarily prepared already in the ways that we could be. So this is raising a lot of questions about our own preparedness for a world disaster of this nature, given our experience of COVID.
Very interesting perspective there. We continue our chat with our panel of experts this evening, unpacking some of the week's leading news stories, including the US and Israel's bombardment of Iran and the retaliatory strikes as well, as we've seen, and also the DA opening up its nomination process for top leadership positions in the party. Unpacking that and more in a short while. Do stay with us. Welcome back. We continue our segment, unpacking the week's leading news stories. And still with us, we do have our panel of experts. Donovan Williams, he joins us in studio. Asanda Ngoasheng, as well as Thembisa Fakude, joining us on Zoom. But we're not having this conversation alone. We also include you, the viewer, to add your input as well, just like Fagazi Ntsakani has done. Fagazi, a very good evening to you. What's on your mind? It seems we have lost our caller there, but remember, you can also engage with us this evening if you want to take part in this conversation. Let me go back to my panel of experts, this time speaking to Donovan. Donovan, I want to turn to domestic issues now. Parliament's ad hoc processes and the Madlanga Commission, but notably events out at the ad hoc committee hearing in Parliament where we saw forensic investigator Paul O'Sullivan simply storming out in frustration. Give us a sense of your reaction to those events.
Look, it was difficult to accept that somebody can say, I'm just walking out of a portfolio committee. But at the same time, I think not just the portfolio committee, but Parliament itself, both the NCOP and the National Assembly, has to also, in a sense, read the room called South Africa. They may think they're important, but I don't think the ordinary people find them as important as they think they are. Not that they necessarily agree with O'Sullivan. They did find him disrespectful. They did find him uncooperative on all the occasions he has come through. But at the same time, they also find that the political parties and their representatives there are more into point scoring, cheap shots, depending on who comes. They did do quite well at the beginning of this year. They were starting to mirror how good the Madlanga Commission was and helpful. But they too easily get sucked into throwing political points for their leaders, whoever they think they should. And I think they did that with O'Sullivan. They got caught up in his whole reputation and so forth. They needed to let him expose himself because he's not that well liked either by the public. But it becomes, which people know, it becomes this theater, this more performative politics, which are just entertainment, a soap opera. And we don't need that because these matters are important. The state of our justice system, its institutions, particularly the police, we've seen what's happened with the Department of Home Affairs and so forth, and that is dire. And people really, really are at the end of their tether with it. And what occurred there, it's not that O'Sullivan was correct, but we don't think our parliamentarians held themselves in high esteem either.
Thembisa, if you'll indulge me as well, I want to track the reactions from National Assembly Speaker Thembisa Tokotitiza, rather. My apologies for that. She's expressed concern after O'Sullivan walked out of these proceedings mid the let's say mid proceedings, if you will. What does this then reveal about the balance between individual defiance and institutional authority?
Well, I think I agree with what Donovan has said, but a few things that are worth mentioning. Number one, the reports suggest that Paul O'Sullivan paid for his trip to Cape Town, went there out of his own free will, and he had a plane to catch. So there was nothing arranged or prepared by Parliament to ensure that he stayed the duration that was expected, because his excuse was that he had a plane to catch. And he walked out, drove his own car to the airport. So that in itself shows some sort of shortcoming from the parliamentary side. That's the first point for me. But the second point, of course, is that, you know, the parliamentary system, or at least our parliament, has been trivialized, and it's becoming a joke to many people in South Africa. You have these people ill-prepared, trying to prove point scoring, playing to political gallery. Most of them forget that they represent the general populace in South Africa. They think they represent themselves. And this is why you have people such as Paul O'Sullivan who come in and continue to undermine them, because they undermine themselves. And I think until we change that situation, we are likely to see more and more of this happening. I don't think Paul O'Sullivan would have done that during the times of either Mbeki or Nelson Mandela. He would have thought twice before doing so. But he knew that he can get away with this because of the trivialization of our parliament and sessions of parliament. But at the same time, I think there are laws, rules, and regulations, and I don't think the chairperson of that standing committee was even aware of the rules and regulation in terms of how to enforce the law, enforce those that are asked to come and give evidence, as it was the case with Paul Sullivan, to respect the rules, to sit and not defy the parliament. You could simply walk. Till today, I haven't seen any report stating a law of any sort that would have insisted on Paul O'Sullivan to stay for the duration of that sitting. And again, that's another shortcoming from our parliament.
A shortcoming on the side of Parliament. But Asanda, Parliament's ad hoc processes and the Madlanga Commission, I mean, they aim to strengthen accountability. But when proceedings become confrontational, does the public see oversight or spectacle?
I think it's a bit of both. It depends on who is being cross-questioned, and it depends on the response of the person, as well as the language and the tone that's being used. So I think that, you know, there have been times where people have seen and felt like a lot of the cross-examination that was happening was good. For instance, when Kat Matala was on the stand and various members, you know, basically said to him that they thought he was a thug, and put some allegations which challenged the statements that he was putting forward. A lot of South Africans were kind of happy about that and felt that he deserved that level of kind of scrutiny unchallenged. But, you know, for me, what has been concerning about some of what has come out, particularly of the ad hoc committee, is when we look at that, you know, that period when Kat Matala appeared, you know, the kind of fanboying, if I can put it like that, that we saw at the end of, you know, the hearing, the ways in which various politicians were huddled around him, smiles all around, laughs all around. That was quite concerning, because here is a man who is accused of being a criminal, who is accused of, you know, collaborating with those who are in political power to abuse state power. And there they are in public, in the full, you know, kind of, the cameras were there, everybody could see, acting in ways that suggest that there might be some credibility to these challenges, whereas what they should have shown as people who are put in a place of trust, deep trust by South Africans via the vote, they should have distanced themselves, and they should have made sure that they are not seen to be in a chummy relationship with this particular witness. And we've seen that, you know, after that particular hearing, we didn't see the same level of chumminess with other people who have appeared. And I would even go as far as saying, you know, I felt, while I understood some of the concern around O'Sullivan, and there is a level at which he was very disrespectful, I also felt like there were times where when they were supposed to just ask the questions and continue, they spent far too much time kind of on side tracks and anger of Julius Malema and various others at why are you telling us this, etc., which are points that, first of all, should have been made before the hearings, as soon as they got the statements, and points that, you know, I felt they sidetracked and they actually wasted everybody's time, because the reason why you have the person there is to answer the question. So for me, it's at the point at which the person refuses to answer the question that you can bring those things. You don't bring it before they've even started answering. And so there is a lot of political point scoring. There's a lot of trying to kind of be the story of the day after the hearings have happened. And so different political parties are kind of looking at this as an electioneering strategy. And that is something that actually disappoints, angers, and upsets the voters, because what they want is accountability. In the same way that we watch the Madlanga Commission to see people being held accountable, we expect that our lawmakers are going to deliver the same, but with important concerns around, you know, holding the executive accountable. Because you must remember, why is this happening in Parliament? It's happening in Parliament because Parliament is the place where the executive is supposed to be held accountable. And we have a situation where a police minister was alleged to have been in good relations with people who are alleged to be criminals. That is a breach of executive power. And that doesn't seem to be at the forefront of what is happening. In some ways, I would say the ad hoc committee has almost become a genre now where kind of over the fence gossip in a lot of ways. And that is problematic because we are spending a lot of time as South Africans on that.
I love Asanda's description there, or analogy, over-the-fence gossip. But testimony has included allegations involving KZN police boss Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, Donovan. How should citizens then distinguish between allegations, political theatre, and proven misconduct?
That's the difficult thing, that I think not just ordinary South Africans, but the political leadership of our country, how do they draw that distinction between allegations, or do they politicize it to the point of that until it's proven?
Yeah.
You know, the guilty until, or innocent until proven guilty scenario. Because you fall short of the expectations of building confidence in the institutions you are set to run if you do not. And we have a situation right now in our country where a particular General Mkhwanazi, to make the distinction between the two, had a press conference, leveled a number of allegations, which forced a commission of inquiry, also this ad hoc committee, and many of those allegations are getting affirmed. They're getting confirmed in one way or the other. So much so you've had a quarterly report which has resulted in suspensions and arrests and so forth. So we as the public are now looking at those allegations, not just as somebody just saying it behind Parliament.
Right.
We're looking at them, they have a sound basis in real terms. So the ad hoc committee on that should be able to say, okay, come and respond to these allegations. Respond to what has been charged about you. Tell us why should we not believe them.
Yeah.
But they're not doing that. They're acting like they are investigators. Like they can be able to investigate it with what? And that's what, I think that's what becomes disappointing in real terms. We want police we can trust. We do not trust the police.
Donovan, we continue this discussion, of course, still being joined by Asanda Ngoasheng as well as Thembisa Fakude as well, joining us via Zoom as we unpack the week's leading news stories. When we return, we continue our discussion. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Continuing our discussion right now, unpacking the week's leading news stories. I want to continue now with Thembisa Fakude. So, Thembisa, the DA, they've opened nominations for the top positions in the party, with Solim Simanga seeking federal chairperson's position. We also have Jordan Hill-Lewis nominated for federal leader. Let's get a sense from you about what you've picked up here. How could this leadership race influence the party's direction nationally and in Gauteng specifically?
Well, many people had felt that there's going to be a breath of fresh air within the DA leadership, with Helen Zille soon to be out of the leadership of that party. I'm sure she's continue playing a role behind the scene. But I think these two candidates are likely to bring some, excitement within the politics of the DA, but also leading to the local elections. I think the advent or the nomination of Solim Simang, who's been a strong voice for at least a day within the African and Black in general constituents of the DA, is likely to galvanize many supporters, I think, in South Africa. The combination of both him and Helen Zille fighting for the seat in Johannesburg is likely to gain momentum, and I think is likely also to present a very stiff and competitive elections come November, if the president does declare November as the month and the date through which these elections are going to be taking place. So it's going to be a tough one, I think, for the ANC. It's going to be a tough one for all other parties that will be contesting, because we've seen what they're doing. I think this combination of both Helen Zille and Salim Simang, at least in Gauteng and within Johannesburg, is likely to present some really interesting politics and competition for other parties.
Asanda, keen to hear your take as well. With Salim Simanga contesting the DA federal chairperson position and Jordan Hill-Lewis nominated for federal leader, how might internal party dynamics in Gauteng and nationally as well, how might they shape voter confidence, but also the broader political landscape ahead of these all-important elections?
Well, I think it's interesting that, Helen Zille, after almost 20 years, has finally given up the federal chair. Well, she wasn't in the federal chair, but she's been a leader for almost 20 years in the DA. But she's still going for the mayor of Johannesburg. We've already seen the swimming in the pothole, and just this weekend we saw her at the Derby in an act that I would say undermines the intelligence of South Africans, because we know that she's not a Pirates fan, come on. And we know that she's not somebody who's usually at soccer matches. Otherwise, she would have been seen at extra strong seats and at soccer matches before. And so it's very clearly an electioneering strategy. And we're seeing now Jordan Hill is saying he's not going to give up Cape Town, but he's also going to be the leader of the DA, which is I have question marks around that, because the Cape Town mayorship is the DA's flagship, and therefore it's quite a big job. The DA leadership itself at national level is quite a big job, particularly if you consider that up until 2029, we could continue to see a GNU where the DA sees itself as quite a big partner or a big kind of party, as it were. And what that means is that Jordan Hill-Lewis may find himself constantly in the struggle of continuing to lead in Cape Town while also having to deal with national issues. And we'll see, now more than ever, the DA in that and showing signs of, the issues that the ANC has seen. Just this weekend, we had Dean McPherson having been alleged to have taken a partner when he wasn't supposed to. There's kind of questions around the amount that the trip was, but there's allegations around taking a partner. And then there's also the question around the DA itself having at some stage having had a policy saying they don't take partners to government events. And so there are all those question marks that people are beginning to ask. We know, of course, that former, well, I suppose now former, because he's basically said he's not going for it. Steenhuisen has had, allegations about Uber Eats spending, 90,000 plus on Uber Eats. And, this is the same DA that used to laugh at ANC people for eating so much KFC and spending so much budget. And now we're seeing them eating so much Uber Eats. And so it's quite an interesting parallel universe that we're living in, where now we are getting to a sense where we can replace ANC scandals for DA scandals. And I think for the first time, the DA is beginning to realize that governing at a national level is not small play. And, we know the saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we're beginning to see that their so-called clean government, so-called no corruption, is beginning to have question marks. Never mind the fact that, by the way, maybe Joburg people don't know, but right here in Cape Town, the DA is not the most popular party. They've just increased rates after valuations, after having increased rates at 30% without consulting the citizens. And so even the governance in November of the DA in the city of Cape Town is not as guaranteed as it used to be, as many people are quite upset at the ways in which the DA is acting unilaterally, increasing rates, as well as selling off public lands like the Cape Town as like the 50 pieces of land that were auctioned this past weekend, which saw actual protests happening, and an actual court case with people trying to stop this, and even the South African Human Rights Commission entering the fray. And so the politics of the city of Cape Town are not easy. The politics of running a GNU partner at a national level are not easy. And Solly himself is now going to find himself, if he becomes the federal chair, also having to deal with this. And Solly doesn't himself have a good track record. We know what happened in Tshwane, where he doesn't have a good track record. And he's been trying to be the premier and the mayor of Johannesburg for the longest time, and has completely failed at every point. And so it's very interesting to see how the DA has gone from being this opposition party who used
Asanda's line is not the best there, but maybe, Donovan, let me give you the parting shot here, the last bite. I know you're itching to give us your sense of developments in the DA as well. What do you make of it? Are you convinced by this apparent shake-up in the party?
I think I'd want to start by just helping Newzroom Afrika by saying that maybe Mr. Delivery can get over Nando's, so you're not accused of advertising certain products. But nevertheless, Helen Zille was the mayor of Cape Town and handpicked Mmusi Maimane to be the leader of the DA, so could be able to represent the DA in Parliament, while she remained the mayor of Cape Town. She then returned when they gave up on a DA trying to make itself a non-racial party with leadership of young black people and so forth, Lindiwe Mazibuko and so forth. They gave up on that. She gave up on that experiment, Helen Zille. Now she's going to Pirates games. Now she's going to the Derby. And within that, the DA is quite clear, and this is more on a national level than the provincial level and the politics of Cape Town, that they are basically they're Trumpist right now. They're quite clear that their constituency is the conservative white constituency, and they threat in that regard is Freedom Front Plus, Action, and what you have within the DA, is to say, we will then try to get other supporters from the black community without necessarily changing that we, at the core, our constituency is the white constituency. They make no bones about that. It's changed from when Zille was trying to do that. She's given up on that. So therefore, the race in the DA, the leader race, there's no race right now. There's literally none. You have Solly Msimang going for national chair with others. There's just a race amongst him with other black leaders. You have a white leader, a white mayor of Cape Town, basically running by himself. And you don't really have a race. Those who are disagreed have been moved off. They have been moved off, like the former Minister of Environment and so forth. So the DA's non-race depicts that all they wish to do is secure their constituency and play along being this conservative body that is supposed to keep in check the transformation aspirations of the South African population.
Encapsulating it quite nicely for us, Donovan Williams. He's a political analyst. Also, Asanda Ngoasheng joining us, and Africa-Asia Dialogue's Senior Research Fellow, Thembisa Fakude, giving us his perspective as well this week. Of course, as we unpack the week's leading news stories, we bring you more news and updates shortly after this.